Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all here. Of course, I knew I was supposed to give a presentation at this conference. It would be quite awkward for me to not at least once take this stage and do my typical State and Future talk. But I was fed up with that State and Future talk, to just talk about state the whole time, right? There was something wrong with talking about state. Future is fine, though. So you have to come up with something new and something different. And I love to use tools that are designed to do their job and to help you do that job better. Unfortunately, the tool that I use to make presentations gave me this. I don't know. What should I be talking about? I don't know. There's stuff I care about a lot that I could talk about. Maybe I should talk about that. What is it that throughout the year that I've been talking about? So eventually I did come up with a title, but it definitely was not the start of my journey of putting together this presentation. So I guess I ended up with this. I was supposed to deliver a keynote, so that's what we do, and I'll just ramble about the state of event sourcing. I guess that's what I will be doing this morning. And it's not something I'm just doing this morning. It's been something it's something I've been doing for the past couple of months. Some of you might have noticed that suddenly this guy that was on LinkedIn all the time suddenly starts shouting around. And I did a LinkedIn influencer course, and it's good fun. It does not involve selfies, which was a prerequisite for me, so that was important. But it was good because it forces me to put my thoughts on paper, which is something that people that know me know I'm not very good at. Remember a few years ago, I promised to not write a book. And I can actually still tell you that I am not writing a book. This experience was pretty stressful. To force myself to write something 2 times a week. The first time it took me 2 hours to write the maximum 3,000 character item. Later it does get a little bit easier. And there's a very awkward correlation between my state of mind and the number of people that actually read the posts. If I write the post while drinking a beer late in the evening, because, oh darn, tomorrow morning I won't have time, so let me just finish it now, people read it a lot more than when I just had my morning coffee and start writing something. So I don't know. Must be the beer. Does it have anything to do with the venue? Who knows? There are 3 topics that are, let's say, coming back in these posts. And those are 3 topics that are very important to me, and it's not strange that they are also very much related to Axonic as well. One of them is open source and business, especially that combination makes things really interesting. Architecture and event sourcing. Well, if there's no post from me about event sourcing in a week, call help. I'm probably not okay. I'm probably being detained somewhere against my will. And innovation, pushing the boundaries of what we think is normal today, so that tomorrow is normal again and we can start all over, right? That lovely cycle. So I want to go through them one by one. So event sourcing is, of course, the main topic. It will be the main topic for today and tomorrow. But to a lot of people, especially out there in the wild, event sourcing is seen as something like a technical detail. It's seen something like a little technical construct that, oh, I can achieve that in another way using my little Postgres database. A very common response, right? Oh, you want history? I can just create a history table. Well, it's not really about the technical details. For me, event sourcing is much more than just that. There's all these things around it that are, strictly speaking, not event sourcing, but to me, they form sort of a nice... I wanted to make a word cloud, but at some point I just wanted to stop putting words on slides. You know, there's a limit to how many words you can put on slides. So there's a lot more. There's a lot of interesting techniques and philosophies, if you want, even around it that are very important. And I would like to see it more as a holistic thing. To me, it's more of a mindset than anything else. It's not a technical detail. It is how you approach the design of your software, how you think about the software, how you talk about it, and then ultimately how you build it and operate it. And all of that, to me, is event sourcing. And something I discovered as well, and I knew that up front, of course, but it's still nice if you see it happening, is that there is actually a very strong community. It is not huge, but it is a strong community. And as you see, there's always haters, right, on the internet, and especially around event sourcing. There's a lot of haters. And I don't understand why, but it adds to the fun, right? So you post something and you wonder, is that Mr. VB, and some people know exactly what I'm talking about, going to talk about his nice Postgres plugins and add-ons that can also track history tables. And yes, he shows up and he has this nice reply. And then you just wonder what some other people are going to respond. Because I've learned to not burn my fingers on negative responses. Like, just leave them be. And there are some people here, and there's one right here in front. They will respond, right? And they will hammer them, and that's fine. That's great. And that's really nice because they come up with arguments and things that you might not have thought about. So it's a continuous learning experience for me as well, learning more about what event sourcing as a holistic thing can mean to people. There's one thing, though, that I think we don't really talk about enough, and that's our problems. Okay, maybe some people talk about their problems quite a lot, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is, what are the real problems that event sourcing solves? And it's tricky, because if you see event sourcing as a mindset that takes a different holistic view, then it's a big list of little things that you can do better, right? Oh, you want a history table? Yeah, but you can do a history table in another way, right? If you want to do history, track history, you can use a history table. If you need auditing, well, you can just write to an audit log, right? Just log.info, whatever, right? It's not a big deal. Oh, you want this? You can just do that. If you want this, just do that. But by now, we've got all these little, oh, just do, just do, just do, just do, just do. And before you know it, you're just doing other stuff and not building what you need to build anymore. So I've done an attempt to basically summarize the problems that we need to address and that we do address with event sourcing. But I don't consider myself the authority that decides, okay, guys, this is the set of problems. This is a starting point. And what I would like to do is trigger discussions. Right? You can all run forward after this talk and debate about that little list of problems. But I think if we become better as a community to articulate what the problems are that we address, then probably more people will start understanding why the hell are we doing this clumsy thing that might as well be replaced by a history table. Well, one of the common problems, and it's a very big one, and very broad as well, I do admit, but we all know that when we embark on a project and we have this initial state, does anyone recognize the greenfield beauty, right? You start a project and it's blank. And it's amazing because you can modularize any way you want. You can build your packages, you can build your modules, and you put every little piece of code in its own nicely separated package. And it's fantastic. And it's fast as well. Because every feature you get, you just wank it in, just in the right place, and go for it. And then this feature comes, and you're like, oh, darn, not quite right. Let me fix it here and there, and move some classes around. And at that point, we don't quite call it refactoring yet, right? It's just moving stuff around. And then at some point, we find ourselves, ooh, that feature, we did not really anticipate that one, did we? Okay, let's move some more stuff around. And as you move stuff around, you actually slow down. You don't deliver as fast anymore. The solution is simple, right? You just recalibrate your story points and just say, yeah, we just give every story a few more story points because at least that way we can keep our velocity. Management's happy, right? Why are you laughing? I don't know. I don't understand. Anyway. So I guess that's something we recognize. And then there's another challenge is, well, greenfield projects don't have any users. Well, one, you, right? You run it and you work on it. They typically also have an empty database. And if I've learned one thing, is that empty databases perform like hell. Oh yeah. They can do a full table scan in no time, literally no time. Put some data in there, still fine. Test environment, no problem. We can handle those 10 testers. That's not a big deal. We can even handle their test data, right? Their data set that's supposedly realistic. But then reality of production kicks in, and you can ask Mitchell about this when reality kicks in as well. Suddenly, people discover your product and they start using it. And they think, hey, let me connect my 1,000 microservices to Axonic Console and see what happens. Well, that was interesting. So then what do? Well, you need to scale somehow. You need to fix the little performance problems that you were supposed to fix next Monday, right? We'll fix those after the weekend. Well, he didn't have until after the weekend, so he spent some time fixing those. But this is a big problem, right? How do you solve performance problems in an application where it's really difficult to even build a feature? And the third problem is a minor detail, right? Who needs data consistency? And this is around the discussion. Of course, we have a lot of discussions around eventual consistency. And when we talk about eventual consistency, everybody always focuses on the eventual part of it, because that's the scary part. But we should focus on the consistency side of it. People are so focused on the eventual word that they forget that they don't even have consistency at all in their current system. And I always compare computer systems to a bunch of kids playing telephone game. Do you know telephone game? Right? Put kids in a row, tell the first kids a story, and then they pass the story along. And the last kid will tell the story out loud, and then you get to hear the actual input story. And it's a laugh, right? It's a laugh because kids do it, and kids like laughing. We also like laughing, but we don't laugh when it's our savings account that is managed by a telephone game working in a bank. I've seen some bankers in here, but I know you guys do this all the time. And then we need to fix it, right? We need to fix the data in different places, and we have a way to do that. That's great. But it's a problem, right? And we've learned to live with that problem, and we're basically, feels like we have a sore leg and we're limping, and we're just accepting that fact. No, we can fix it, right? There's a way to fix it. And all we need to do is just change our mindset. That's all. Easy. And I think the root cause of all of these problems is data-centric thinking. We've been taught, or at least I've been taught, and I'm pretty sure that many of you, if you've gone to any form of education in software engineering, that you've also been taught to build relational data models, right? ERDs, fantastic, amazing, the best way to design the system. And then you just put a few layers on top, just like that. Problem solved, right? So our big famous layered architecture, that Ted Neward called BBC architecture, box, cylinder, right? The cylinder holds our data. That's our most important assets. That's where we spend the time to think about how everything should be connected. But to make sure that everything is connected and stays connected exactly the way that we want, we put a box in front of it, but nobody can touch the cylinder. But you don't want that box to be poked, so we build a UI in front of it, right? So the box in the middle will have our business logic, and then the box in front will have our user interfaces. And this is the way we've been taught to build software. And even though we use different architectural styles, you can draw this as a hexagon if you want to. And it will look amazing. But it will be exactly the same. It will not be fundamentally different It's still box cylinders, except that the boxes now have more angles. And of course, the big solution is to go to microservices, right? I mean, a few books appeared in the mid-2010s, and that was the big solution. So we all start building smaller components. We spread everything out, and we let every little component be its own box cylinder thing. And the beauty is that a lot of people have this box cylinder mindset when doing so. So basically the design is that you have your backend for front end, you have your business logic services that you can share, and then you have some services that capture the data. Great, so we've built a box cylinder on top of itself. That will get us further. We call this innovation. So the solution is fairly simple. Event-centric thinking. Easy, right? Just event-driven systems are going to solve all of our problems. It will solve the consistency. Really? Anyway. So what we do, and some people call this project Project Frans. We'll see tomorrow a few more details about Project Frans. I don't know. I hope I didn't give too much away now. But in the keynote tomorrow, we'll see how to do this kind of stuff. But so we embark on a project, and that project is to replace all the communication with a bus, and it can be anything as long as it is Kafka. All right. So that will solve it, right? Problem solved. And we can move on. And from now on, every feature will be built at the same velocity. Well, I would like to propose a different solution, which I would love to believe is the real solution, but is not to just think about events, but think about events as the source of everything. In some cases, it is even the source of inspiration of how to build an application. If you think about techniques that use events as the starting point, right? So it's not event sourcing as the technical little detail anymore. It is the source of the entire process. And then events not as in a message that is delivered asynchronously, but more an event as something that happens in our software. Just a little fact that we can talk about, right? Any unit of something that can happen that is relevant enough for us to even talk about. And that's nice. We found that, well, in the 15 years that I've been playing around with event sourcing, by the way, a little fun fact, the first lines of code were written a few hundred meters from here, just right there. You can see a tall square building. That's the Dutch National Bank, and it's right across there. So if you want to do a little scenic tour of Amsterdam, go to Frederiksplein, look north, and you can feel the Axon radiation still there. It must be still very strong. And I actually see some people in the audience that are from that time, that they were sitting next to me on those very first projects where Axon was created. And in that time, since then, I found that event sourcing is a very powerful tool, or technique, if you will. But it's also different from what we're used to. It has a learning curve that we really have to get across. And it's not always a smooth learning curve, depending on how you embark on a project and what the challenge is that you're applying event sourcing in for the very first time. I did find, though, that that curve is a hill. It does go down afterwards, because then to unlearn it, you have to go through the same curve again. But that's a different problem, and that's not our problem, right? We don't have to go back anymore. And it sometimes also feels awkward, because you will find that little problems that you encounter, little design techniques that you could use in a data-centric world are not applicable anymore in an event sourcing world. So the tools that you have in your tool belt have become useless at some point. So you have to learn new techniques sometimes to solve problems that you already knew how to solve. And I guess it has to do with age as well, because I've noticed that there's two categories of developers. And you could say, well, there's juniors and seniors, but I would say there's, let's say, the absolute juniors, they don't have that awkwardness because they're fresh. They're sponges. Their heads are sponge. Whatever you tell them is the first thing they hear anyway, so they can go for it. They don't have this learning curve problem. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the very senior people. And by the way, senior is anyone who has been through let's say, an entire cycle in IT, which is, some people argue, around 11 years. Right? So if you have more than 11 years experience, you've seen it all, and we're just spiraling either up or down, depending on what you personally think. But the same technologies seem to reappear after 11 years in a slightly different shape. And they've seen it. They know event sourcing, because there was something like event sourcing, well, several years ago. And it's just like that, so that's fine. But it's that group in the middle. So who here has more than 3 years experience, but less than 11? Good luck, you can do this. Right? You can do this. Ask questions, embrace the awkwardness. Right? You'll be fine, you'll live. Other people have outlived this as well. So the awkwardness is there. It also requires some investment because of that learning curve and because of that awkwardness and because we need to find these solutions to problems that we already knew how to solve, but we can't use those solutions anymore in this new, in the new laws of physics, if you will. And that's fine. And we have to be aware that, of course, the investment is ultimately worth it. Right? And this is where, well, where we feel we need to step in. And this is where we need to build tools that help people do the job that they need to do. Right? Just like PowerPoint was really trying to be helpful and say, hey, what title do you want to give your presentation? Even though I had no clue what I wanted to talk about. And the tools are similar, right? It's, well, there's Axon Framework, great. What do you want to call your aggregates? I don't know. I don't even know what I need to build. So it's not just tools, it's also techniques that we need to master. And I've been using this, this picture in a lot of presentations, so I really did not want to use anything different. Does anyone not know what this picture is about? Raise your hand if you don't. I know there's always one, yes. See? And it's perfectly fine. It either means you're young or you had actual interest in doing something other than watching TV. This is a scene from a movie called Karate Kid. And there's a remake of the movie. Don't watch it. Watch the original one. And mind you that the mindset was 80s, right? So there's a lot of stereotypes that nowadays are not quite acceptable anymore. Such as, if you want to get the nicest girl in school, you fight. Don't just fight, do karate. And if you want to learn karate, find a Japanese guy in your vicinity, because they are the masters of karate, all of them, right? Any Japanese people in here? Right, so, okay, a lot of exaggerated stereotypes. But the boy wants to learn karate, and then Mr. Miyagi goes, okay, there's my car, here's some wax, here's a sponge, go. Right? And Daniel, as the boy is called, he doesn't understand, why do I need to wax a car? Or why do I need to do CI/CD pipelines to get my microservices? I just want to do microservices. I just want to put Kafka in the middle and call it a day, right? That's what I want to do. Why do I need to do all this test-driven development, blah, right, kind of stuff? We don't have to wax cars, fortunately, to get event sourcing done properly. But there are other techniques, and one of them, Sarah already mentioned it in the introduction. One of them is event modeling. And there's different techniques, but there's event storming as well. And event modeling and event storming are somewhat similar, right? Where event storming is really designed to let you discover problems. And maybe the solution is software, maybe it's not. Maybe there is no problem to solve. Maybe there is. Maybe it's a completely different problem that you initially thought you were supposed to solve. Event modeling is a bit more focused towards, okay, you know you want to build a piece of software for something, let's design it. And in the way that it approaches things is that the data is really not even in there. It really is the last thing that you'll ever put in there. So it's not data-centric at all. It's all about behavior. What is it that you want this system to do? And strangely enough, there's not much talking about what a system does in a lot of projects that I've visited in the last 15 years. It's all about what data it captures and how state changes in the system. And event modeling, surprise, surprise, uses events as the starting point. Because events describe what a system did, and therefore what it does. And then you describe from the events outward, okay, how did this event occur? What kind of screen does it need for that to occur? What kind of information do we want to show to the user on this screen? Where do we get the information from, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very logical approach. And we found that actually doing event modeling is a very important factor in how successful your event sourcing project is. It is not to say that if you don't, you will fail, and if you do, you will succeed. But we've identified quite a few projects in those last 15 years. It's actually over 100 that we've been involved with. And we did notice the pattern, that projects that did not quite succeed in the best possible way, and I'm not saying every failure of a project means it never sees the daylight, but it just means that it was more expensive than anticipated. It took longer than one would expect for it to take. And we did notice those projects use more traditional approaches of, just think about the data, build an aggregate around your data to keep it consistent, and then you're done, right? Call it a day. Projects that were very successful and keep on moving at the same pace, and not by recalibrating story points, they used event sourcing. So we've decided to come up with a playbook. Book, you say? Yes, I said book, but I said I will not write a book. So somebody else is writing that playbook. Actually, our colleague Mark is working on the playbook, and basically the playbook is kind of like a recipe book. That, hey, I want to embark on a project. What steps do I take to make this work? And we use this internally. Basically, it's a writing down of the processes that we follow when we guide our customers to their success. But we want to publish it to anyone who wants to read it. And it basically has a couple of patterns, right? There's one example of many patterns that are in there, and we will evolve this and more. So what are those problems that we encounter, and how can we solve them in this new world? Right? So we don't have this awkward feeling anymore. It's not just patterns. There's also, as you can see, some fundamentals. Like, okay, how do we follow this? What is the process we need to follow? What is this road to success that we could follow to make sure that we don't fail, or we have less likelihood of failing? Of course, in projects, there's a million other factors that are part of the success or failure of that particular project. This is just taking away one of them. All right. Enough about event sourcing for today. Not just kidding, just for a little while. There'll be more later. Don't worry about it. There's another thing that is very important to me, and that's open source. When I started the project 15 years ago, it was an absolute no-brainer to decide what license to put on that initial piece of code. Because it wasn't the first time that we did something with open source. The company was heavily linked to at the time it was called SpringSource, the company behind Spring. And we all know Spring is Apache 2 licensed, so that is what the license had to be, right? It is very open, and it allows us to get feedback. Feedback in the form of, oh, that doesn't work, up to, hey, here's a pull request to make it better. And anything in there is as good, right? Anything in between those two is as good as any other. And that's beautiful because open source allows you to build a community of people that care about the same problem. And it was a great learning experience. I've made the most stupid mistakes you can make when implementing an event source systems. And I guess that's necessary to really understand what it's about, right? You only know that there's something there if you hit your head against it. Then you'll never make that mistake again. Reminds me of a situation where I really hit my head, and there was a sign, "Mind your head." That's the worst place to put it, because I'm looking there, right? And I only realized it was really stupid to put it there. Well, after you hit your head, you look at it and go, oh yeah, true, yeah, thanks. Thanks for the upfront warning. In some places where they're really smart, they put it on the floor. Watch your head. You go like, oh, yeah, thanks. Well, if you're almost 2 meters tall, that stuff happens. So I've bumped my head several times in the event sourcing realm, right? I've done some really bad implementations, and that's why there's Axon 4 right now, right? There's at least 3 big mistakes that we've learned from. And yeah, some of you experienced those mistakes as well, and you gave feedback, and that's how we improve things. And that's beautiful. That's what I love about open source. But my topic wasn't open source, was it? It was open source in business. And that's where things got really awkward and tricky sometimes, because there's a lot of tension between the two. Because open source is about giving and then getting. Usually business is about just getting more, right? What's our revenue? Well, not enough, we need more, right? Well, it's a different mindset. And if you combine those two, it is very interesting. Really interesting things happen, in the British sense of the word interesting, which is not interesting at all, it's just weird. But let me give you an example. These are some open source companies that are out there. And do you know what they all have in common? There's a few missing there, but there's more like those. These companies all decided to adopt a source available model instead. And just in case you're not aware of the difference of open source and source available, those are terms that are being used to be very clear about what a license allows you to do and not to do. Open source projects are projects where you can do practically whatever you want. There are some limitations, right? But you can just take the software, run it, make money, and call it a day. That's fine. That's open source. You can contribute back. At least you're always invited to contribute back, etc. Source available is different. Source available just means you can look at the source code, but you keep your hands behind your back, right? Don't touch it. You cannot always use it in a commercial environment. There will be restrictions, right? So a lot of these companies, they moved their software to the right. So why did they do that? Well, obviously, for a company that builds open source software, their employees typically like to have breakfast and lunch, and if possible, a dinner as well, and have a bed that they can sleep in, preferably change their sheets every now and then, right? So it takes a little bit of money to build that. And, well, there was no money in this whole experiment, right? I just build software, you get feedback, and that's great. We build it as a community, but somebody has to eat. And this is why they do that. They just want to, they basically find out that we're giving something away for free, and we're not getting anything, money, in return. So we need to find a way to do that. Well, let's pull the rug from underneath all of these open source contributors and say, hey, you know what? That's the last you got, and now you got to pay up. It almost feels like you're walking down in Amsterdam at 3 a.m. in the morning, and this could happen to you, right? These little shady guys that give you this white powdery stuff. You get the first one for free, but then you got to pay later, right? It's not quite, it's not a beautiful gesture, right? Let's call it that way. But of course, the question arises that, hey, if everybody else is doing something, should we? This is scary, isn't it? Where the hell is this presentation going? But yes, we've had discussions like, hey, should we do that as well? What is the role of open source within Axonic? And are we really similar to all those companies that were listed there? The answer is no. We are not exactly similar as all of those companies out there. For us, innovation is a very important concept. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And open source is the best way to innovate. We need to move boundaries. We cannot do that by ourselves. We need you to help us do that. And that means we have to keep building this community, and we have to keep building trust, I guess, but also sharing what we have and what we know and what we've learned so that you can share how you've been using it and what kind of nasty little head bumps you've hit along the way, so we can put signs on the floor to warn people, right? But there's always the question, and there's always the balance. In the end, we also have a growing team that is hungry in the morning and hungry during lunch, and in the evening, some of them are still hungry, and they still need to eat. So we still need to find that balance. But in that balance, there's always space for open source. And we have absolutely no plans to make Axon Framework anything else than the Apache 2 license it is right now. So we can all sleep. We'll all be fine. That brings us to the last topic, right? Not entirely unrelated to all of those, but that's innovation. We like to push the limits of what is normal, right? We like to move into the awkward space and see if we can take some of that awkwardness away. And we've done that by building a couple of products, things, tools out there. And these are the main ones. There's some more, some smaller ones out there, but these are the main tools. We probably all know Axon Framework, right? Accidentally built 15 years ago. And in that, the way it was conceived was that there was a problem. I just wanted to find out if CQRS and event sourcing are a way to solve that problem. And it was interesting. And it had some other problems. And I thought, hey, if everybody needs to solve these little problems, why can't we just build a tool that helps them solve that and make it easier? The funny thing is, if you do that, the community is creative enough to find more problems. So you solve those, and then they solve more, find more problems, and you solve more, et cetera, et cetera. And that is wonderful. That is basically the synergy that we want to have with open source software. But we also noticed that projects at scale had some issues to manage all of the communication with those commands, events, and queries. What if you have a lot of events? How do you manage those? There's a limit in Postgres of how fast it can go, right? And as I said earlier, empty databases are really fast. So in a demo, you can just, a little bike rental application, it will run fine. Just reset your database every now and then it even performs, right? That's not a big deal. But reality is different, and that's where we started to build Axon Server. And Axon Server has grown to become quite of a big machine, if you will, right? Where it started really as, oh, we need to communicate between a few nodes, and we need to make sure that the data is reliably stored somewhere and fast to access. I suddenly realized in a presentation, people started to ask me about, what about disaster recovery, right? Can we do cross-regional replication? Yeah, sure, you can. You can have live backups the whole time, right? You can just stream your data live to anywhere else. Oh, but what if I have a multi-regional setup and I have applications running in different regions to serve our customers in those regions? Can we make sure that they optimally connect to the right nodes? Yeah, you can do that as well. That's not a problem at all. Oh, what about monitoring? Can we hook it up to our monitoring systems? Yeah, sure. It's all in there. You can download 60 megs a second on telemetry if you want to, right? It's all in there. So it really became this big machine that takes care of everything. You don't need much else when you use it. And the last one is Axonic Console. It's the new kid on the block. There will be a demo later tomorrow, I believe, on those topics, so you can see the state of those tools. But Axonic Console was born out of a desire to open this black box, right? So Axon Framework and Axon Server just magically communicate or allow your components to communicate with each other in a very transparent way. Well, the problem with transparency is that you can't see it. And sometimes you want to visualize that. And that's what Axonic Console does. And, well, that's how it started. And now it's becoming more of a monitoring tool that is very much aware of the Axon specifics. So it doesn't replace your existing monitoring tools, but it gives you much more specific knowledge about how Axon applications are built. So I want to do a quick overview of what's been going on in the past year and what it is that we're working on now. Kind of a state and future, but in a small way. So last year, right after the conference, we released 2023.2 of Axon Server. And our 0.2 versions are long-term support releases. So if you work in an environment where you don't want the state-of-the-art, and you're like many of us who like to have production be the most boring environment on the planet, nothing exciting should happen in production, right? Because if something exciting happens, there's usually pagers going off and people sacrificing their weekends to make things work again. So you want things boring, and that's what our 0.2 releases are about, the boring stuff. But it's the most important stuff. So if you jump from 0.2 version to 0.2 version, you only need to do an upgrade whenever there's a bug fix or a security patch. Right? We'll fix those a couple of years back in the 0.2 versions. And we also delivered 2024.0 and 1. 0.2 is coming up soon. And in the 2024 version, we've revamped the user interface. Right? Stefan Dragišić was the mastermind behind that project, and he said, I hate this UI, the old one. Right? He didn't say that about the new one just yet. Probably won't take long, but because it didn't quite, it was built inside out. It was designed from, oh, this is the information we have. This is the data we have. Let's expose it. Does that sound familiar? That was the data-centric thinking again, right? I mean, hey, we have to learn as well. So it was designed the other way around. What is it that somebody goes to the UI? What is it that they need to do? And it was more focused around those actions. We also implemented persistent streams, which is quite useful if you have an application that in itself or by itself doesn't need to have any database. So you can just project information, you can consume events, and then Axon Server will keep track on where you were in reading those events. So when that application stops and restarts and opens the stream again, it will continue streaming where it left off. Which is quite useful if you want to avoid a situation of sending emails all over again when you do a replay. Does that sound familiar? It happens, right? We've made interesting mistakes in the past, and we're happy to share about all the things that we've done to break our software, so that you can find other creative ways to break your software. And we've also improved, or we are currently working on more stability and disaster recovery features. Right? So even though, well, we can survive a pretty big disaster in our deployments, but sometimes setting it up requires a little bit too much knowledge of how Axon Server works. So we want to build some tools that make it easier to recover. So you can just tell your ops team, hey, here's some tools, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And of course, there's 2025 coming soon, right? You can see outside that we're approaching fall. Well, we're in the middle of it. We just had summer last week. This week is fall, and probably next week is winter. So that means the end of the year is approaching, and that means 2025 is approaching like a runaway train. And what we are working on is yet another kind of index, right? We are learning about the usage patterns that people have in their systems. There are some interesting projects in Belgium and in Austria that involve doing something for all of the civilians in that country. And that's quite a few. And if you have a few aggregates per civilian, you end up with lots of aggregates. And if they're all active the whole time, then it's not quite the ideal world, where you have a small number of aggregates that live for a very short time, and then you have little streams of events that are not important anymore. So we are looking at different index styles to make these lookups really as performant with an empty database as they are with a full database, without running the risk of consistency problems, of course. That is our golden rule, right? Consistency first, and the rest comes later. And of course, the big topic, DCB, the dynamic consistency boundary. This is one of the lovely topics on LinkedIn where you know you're going to get feedback. Different types of feedback from people that, and the interesting thing is that people that really understand event sourcing, they give you two different responses. Some of them say, you're up to something. There's something in there that will really help. And others will say, impossible. The aggregate is really important. And the interesting thing is that when this idea was conceived almost 2 years ago, I was in that second group. I said, hell no. And they fed me rakia, which is, for those who don't know what rakia is, it's 60% water. And, well, they made me see it. So, and guess what? Now it's being implemented, and it's there. Right? I was wrong, but I gave my colleagues the chance to go figure it out. So there is a workshop later today about the DCB. There you can experience how it works, more or less. It's still very much early stages of implementation, but you can feel how it works and how it can solve your problems. Then there's Axon Framework. We've had a few releases last year, 4.9 and 4.10. As you can see, the amount of big features is pretty small, right? There are small things that we're improving. Some support, of course, in 4.10. We added support for persistent streams. It's nice if the server supports it. We also have framework support it. And then there's some operations features in there to make Axon run smoother in production. And yeah, test containers. Why not make them reusable, right? So you don't have to wait for the startup of Axon server. But if you have several test cases running against the same Axon server test container in a row, they reuse the same container over time. It's just a feature of test containers, but it requires some resetting to happen. By the way, Spring Boot Docker Compose is also a very interesting feature. If you use Spring, you can put a Docker Compose file in the root of your project. And when you start your application, it will automatically start the containers that you need for that application as well. Yeah, and then there's Axon 5. I mean, we talked about it last year. Last year, we were very much in a design phase. Right now, we're implementing it. And it is a lot of work to get things done because we didn't want to take it very lightly. We thought, hey, if we are allowed to break things, let's do it, right? Let's rebuild it from the ground up. We're not rebuilding everything. Of course, we're reusing parts of it, but the way it works internally is really designed from the ground up, so that we can support this aggregate-less command models, right? The DCB feature. You'll find out in the workshop, and if not, you can always ask us to show you how it works. We'll have different API layers, if you will, to support both the annotation approach as well as more declarative style lambdas, right? So we're not obliged to use annotations. And then async execution, everything at the core is designed to execute things asynchronously so we can massively parallelize work. Right? That's important in high load environments. That brings us to the last topic. So Axonic Console doesn't really have versions. Well, there's one version, and that's in production right now, and there's another version, and it's going into production later, maybe in 10 minutes, maybe in 50 minutes. Whenever they push the push button, it just goes into production. So we've changed the onboarding process, so if you haven't used Axonic Console for a while, definitely try it again. It's been revamped. There's a lot of detailed metrics about how long does it take to load your aggregates, how many events are involved, et cetera, all those kind of things. And we've added a feature to alert you. If there's a certain threshold that is met, then you can set an alert. We are working on the message flow diagram, so you can see how messages flow throughout your systems. There's different views. There's different ways to decide what does a thick arrow mean, what does the size of the nodes mean. Is that high performance or is it low performance, etc. Things like that. And it is the place where you can buy your Axon Server licenses as well. So we've added several plans for Axon Server, so that even with small budgets, you can have a highly available installation of Axon Server running wherever you want. Coming soon, asterisk there. Soon is whenever it is, not any earlier than that. We're working on simplifying the plans. There's a few too many right now, so we want to reduce that, make it easier. And we're working on suggestions and best practices. We realize that, hey, we're inspecting an Axon application. We know what they should look like. So if yours doesn't quite look like it should, we can tell you and say, hey, your aggregate is really loading a lot of events. Did you consider snapshotting? Things like that, right? So we're putting some advice in there. And we're working on hosted Axon Server clusters. And that's a lot of talk about yesterday, the stuff that we've been doing, and there's a lot of stuff that we will be doing as of tomorrow. But you'll almost forget that there's this little spot. Let me zoom in. Today. You'd almost forget that there's a today as well. And today is about getting people together that are curious and that really like to share their knowledge. Right? So there will be people on this stage throughout today and tomorrow to share what they know, not because they think they know better than you do, because they just want to share what they know and gather feedback. Right? And we want to learn from that as well. And together, we redefine the state of the art of event sourcing. And well, with all the people here, I'm pretty sure that we understand that it's events that change the states. So welcome at our event, and let's do this. Thank you. And with that, we have our coffee break, and we'll be back in 15 minutes for the next session. Thank you.